Meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. We have a rather packed agenda, and I hope the folks watching at home, either now or when the tape becomes, or shall we say, the video becomes available. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Fort Point in the form of the program manager, and we're going to start off with her presentation of the work going forward so that we can begin the revitalization of the common.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. And it's very nice to finally meet you in person again. See you. We've talked several times. So I just wanted to start out by introducing some of the sort of overarching concepts of the work. I know we've talked a little bit about this in our interview, but we wanted to reiterate a few important fundamentals of the work that we have planned. And one thing I'd like to note is we'd like to talk, as the agenda shows, about the sort of overall approach and the timeline that we've currently devised for the project and gain your feedback on that. Obviously, this is a project that's more important, near and dear to your hearts in terms of all of the work that you've already done, and we're really cognizant of that. We'll talk a little bit about what we've learned. And then I want each of our team members to have the opportunity to talk about their approach specifically. And then I hope that we can have an open discussion and getting your feedback on some of the elements that we've presented tonight. If you have any questions about some of the segments, we've sort of broken it up into those 3 segments, which would be to discuss the overall approach and then to talk about the redevelopment scenarios and the economic analysis. We'll pause and take some questions, but then we hope to have a larger discussion afterwards. Because I believe that a lot of this will make more sense as you see it all come together. Is it better if I stand, or would you prefer? I don't want to leave you all out in the back there. So one of the handouts that you have, and I'm going to just send over a quick updated one, is the timeline that we've devised. Thank you. And provided one for each of you. So as you take a look at this, I want to give you sort of a flavor. We looked into the work that has been done in terms of engagement for the master planning process that relates to the common. We looked very deeply into your meeting minutes to get just up to speed in terms of the timeline that you're looking for in terms of the EEA grant and that requirements, and also the overarching goals and objectives of the RFP. And that we also tried to think very strategically about project milestones and engagement points that would make sense in terms of where we're at with each of the tasks of the project, and places where we feel that it would be important to gain your feedback and stakeholder engagement, key stakeholders as well. So I'll just start out with, you'll see that there are a number of tasks that are all lined up in the start. And that is because we want to try to accomplish a certain level of initial data collection, data analysis, and feedback as we move into very quickly starting to look at redevelopment scenarios. Also, there's a certain level of work that needs to be accomplished before June 30th in order for the state, the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, to have a report on what those are, what those tasks are. So we talked a lot about this at the team level, and we thought there's a certain number of stakeholder interviews and engagement pieces that could happen with your expertise and your involvement. And we could start to look into the scenarios, and Kenan will give a little bit of a flavor of that. We also tried to pinpoint where your committee meetings might lie in the timeline. So I understand that you don't necessarily have an ongoing meeting schedule. However, if we sort of estimated that you have a meeting once a month, then we can sort of have those as markers. And that's where we based some of the other engagement pieces on. So for example, you'll see that after the second committee meeting, we do hope that at this point we'll be able to have sort of an open workshop to bring in stakeholders and have public feedback at that point after we've worked with you to get through the initial tasks. And then the next milestone in terms of public engagement would be to think about what information that we'd like to garner from the community after we've had a chance to just devise some of the initial scenarios, do the market analysis, and look into the economic impacts, and then have some feedback time for us to then prepare the final scenarios. So that's what you're seeing here as sort of the August to September timeframe. And then I understand that there will be a town meeting at the end of October. So that's another sort of point in time in which we want to start looking at taking the scenarios and moving that into the plan in the planning process. And then the next marker is, throughout the winter, really looking at, how the plan is developing, moving from a draft plan to a final plan, and then taking that information to start to look at the zoning analysis. So that's how that frames out there. And then moving through the spring into the Springtown meeting, where we really need to, at that point, be ready to prepare to have zoning amendments to submit for approval, and then at the final town meeting. So in each of these steps, there's a number of points of engagement that we hope to have with you, whether it's at the committee meetings themselves, or if willing, conversations by phone, emails, and correspondence in many other ways. But your direct feedback is very important to this process. Just to give you a sense of how this came together, again, we really thought about what are the tasks, what are the primary activities that were outlined in the RFP that we then expanded upon in our proposal, and that how they make sense sequentially for us to be able to move very seamlessly through the project. This is what we expect to be able to accomplish within the first 30 days, 60 days. I really, we've talked a lot, and we've tried to put some real milestones together that can be accomplished over these next few weeks, and that's where the box has been outlined there. So essentially, we're looking at, again, trying to collect as much data as needed, some of the stakeholder meetings and the interviews. The market analysis will occur shortly thereafter, and also some public feedback if that's something that the committee is willing for us to prepare. And then at that point, we'd be at a very good place to have the first report back to the state and move then forward into the next step of the economic analysis and final in the revised scenarios. Milestones we've gone over, but as you can see, I think it's a very good way that to have the committee meetings in between a lot of these engagement milestones. I think is going to be very important. And then another thing we wanted to show is that we've all of the team has looked very carefully into the work that's been done, reviewed the master plan itself, reviewed all of the materials, and we've tried. What I'm trying to do here is to pull out some of the pieces of information that really rose to the top in terms of what expectations or goals had been that came to fruition during the public engagement that relates directly to the commons and or connection to the commons. So what I'm trying to show here, and also I hope that I put it in a positive light, meaning that starting with sort of an overall topic, moving into, okay, well, we understand that there are weaknesses. However, there are strengths in this particular issue that we can then pull out the right pieces of information to provide the right recommendations for the common through some opportunities. So that's sort of the flow of this. And I can provide this to you. I think, we can come back to these particular topics because I think these are areas that are probably more important to each of you. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspectives on some of the discussions that have surrounded, of course, with regard to wastewater, the district itself, and some of the business owners' perspectives. I think that's very crucial right up front in the time that we have to look into the issues. So I've given you sort of an overview of public engagement, but right off the bat, we're building this upon your initial stakeholder process that you've done. I think it's also going to be very important for us to work with you directly on just determining if there are key stakeholders that you feel that there should be direct outreach to, and that can be something that we supply the right information. You have relationships with folks all through the town, and I think it would be important for us to, we're not the residents of the town, or we don't have businesses here, so if we're able to provide you with some questions or some important items to discuss, I think it might be important for the committee to be involved in that way. And also, this is maybe sounds silly, but one of the things that we've learned, I think we've all learned throughout our time in working in different planning projects, is regardless of who the stakeholder is or what perspective they come from, it's important to gain some trust and to really have comfortable, conversations with them in a place that makes sense or on their schedule. So I hope that it's all right for us to have a little bit of flexibility in terms of how we're engaging, and we really want to work with you on developing the workshop format and the open house format. We have some ideas, but it's important for us to gain some perspectives from you on whether there are concerns or conflicts of interest in terms of current land uses. Then we just want to note that there's a lot of analysis that's been done. There's a lot of spatial analysis that we can build from, which is very important. And so, for example, here, just looking at land use, it already speaks to us in terms of how the commons and the surrounding area, how it fits within the town and the framework that we have in terms of how these land uses interplay. So we're thinking a lot about that, and also thinking about the base zoning, understanding that there's been changes to zoning in terms of the sewer district. However, there's a matter of base zoning that also rises that needs to be addressed, and how some of those dimensional uses and other standards are addressed. So we'll really get into that as well. At this point, I really would like to turn it over to Kenan. I think UTL has some really interesting and great perspectives about the public engagement piece itself and how that relates to the redevelopment scenarios. So if you want to come on over here.
Sure.
But I guess what I should do is, if there's any questions in terms of clarification, maybe not discussion points, I'm more than happy to take those now.
I have a question, but I'll wait till I hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to do questions at the end then?
Actually, I mean, whatever you prefer, but I guess we were thinking there may be pieces of our other team's presentation that might answer, but please, if there's a question you have.
Well, as long as we can come back to them.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm from, I've mentioned before, I'm from UTL. We're an architecture and planning firm, and we have a lot of experience with this scale of work and also with the public engagement process. And what I think is very helpful is building on the master plan study and how this was really a hands-on workshop, and that's something we want to continue with the scenario development. So kind of a broader overview of how we see that. We see that the first step for us is to get an understanding of what, from our partners at Donahue, what the market can if we did a market scan, what that tells us in terms of viability for different use types in this area specifically, and then take that and compare it to a kind of broad model of what would be likely to develop under existing zoning. And we think that's really the strongest starting point for this process, and to use that as a basis for 3 scenarios in a similar way to, you know, how this process was kind of run. We could then bring that to the public and make it a more active experience where we have, you know, smaller tables and groups where people can write directly on the map, similar to this, and work with the model to think about the scale of that. So we've called this in the past test fit analysis, but I think what a better term for it might be that it's more scenario planning. And so the scenario planning isn't a spatial plan necessarily, but just one option that might develop under a series of zoning regulations. And so we kind of understand that as trained architects as well. And so we have this ability to work between the two. And I think the advantage of that is we can start to bring in some of the issues that were mentioned and really thought about in the master plan in terms of walkability, bikeability, connection to other uses such as the IBM campus, I think is really important in relation to the retail businesses in the area and some of the new development on the other side of 495 and how that's connected. And thinking about, you know, how we can balance development with some of the things that Littleton as a community wants, and how that complements some of the historic features that are already on the site and the common as a space itself. So one of the first steps that we wanted to work with the team here with is understanding what the actual boundaries of the site are and where you see that as a study area, because that's really our first step of what we need to do to get going. And so, you know, I think you are all very familiar. I'm somewhat familiar with this area. I'm from nearby, but wanted to get an understanding of, you know, is the common proper our space, or are we also including some of Great Road? And are we including anything on the Beaver Brook side of the site as well? And so we did a quick little mapping study so that we could talk at the end of this meeting about, and we brought a map we can draw on as well, where those boundaries actually are and where you want to look. But I think the important part is we see this as framed within both existing land uses in this case, but also the zoning that is in place. And so we looked generally at the base zoning for the area and feel like, you know, when you start to look at the base zoning plus the overlay district, plus what's not on here is the Aquifer and Water Resource Protection District, there's a lot of challenges that I know you are all aware of. And I think it's interesting because it's kind of like an interesting puzzle. How do you work within the height limit, the permeability restriction? I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be accommodating the amount of parking necessary within this to start to get some of those, the stronger public realm that it sounds like Littleton really wants along the streets. And so we want to talk about this a little bit after the presentation, but we've seen all of these zoning districts as kind of our area of influence, and then based on the previous work in the workshop, we took a guess at what we thought the scope area where we're actually going to, you know, design scenarios might be, but we are open to this shifting or changing.
So that area in red,
Surrounded in red.
Yes,
Surrounded in
the red outline. Yeah,
that's your,
that was our estimate based
Your
on
estimate. Okay, thank you.
past work.
okay.
So that's what the one thing that UTL as a team would like to leave this meeting with, so that we can really jump into the scenarios and get going quickly. As Julie had outlined, our plan is to use, you know, the existing condition scenario as a comparison to 3 others so that we can bring them to you and then narrow that down to 2. So I'll turn it over to Rod. It's musical chairs.
Okay, so what I would like to talk about, hopefully rather briefly, is our approach to our segment of the work, the economics. My understanding of the way it's going to work and what I'd like to talk about is how we sort of phase in and out around UTL's work. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, but I'd like to couch it in, again, this understanding of some of the key economic development issues that the town has already been talking about. So there's clearly the public transit issue. You know, the master plan is full of stuff about how do you connect the train station to the town common, how do you connect the industrial area over here to this area over there, and what's the relationship to the point, and so on. So we'd like to, roll that in. Obviously, the wastewater treatment is an issue. It puts a limit on the kinds of development you can have and where you're going to have it, but obviously we're having the sewer development district conversation. And then business vacancies. So the space availability, I know that there's an interest in the town for renovation and infill rather than new development, so we're going to take a look at sort of what's going on there in terms of space availability, obviously with the util folks. But those are some ideas those are some boundaries or boxes within which we're going to operate. But more broadly, we're going to start with a market analysis. So I brought the slides that you have already seen by way of reminder. We have to start with a market analysis to figure out what is feasible for the scenario building to happen. So we need to figure out what are the population trends, the employment trends, commuting. We need to look at housing, home building trends. We need to do a market analysis in terms of what's the retail customer base, what is all of that stuff needs to happen in advance of the scenario building. We then kind of cool our heels for a little bit until the scenarios are done, and then we take those scenarios and do the impact analysis part of them. So our work is really into two pulses, one heavy up front and one heavy kind of toward the middle when there's economic impact analysis happening. Some of the things that we need to figure out, not necessarily right now in this meeting, but I want to make sure it is on your agenda. When we get to the economic impact analysis component of our work, there are some decisions to be made. In our RFP interview, you heard me talk about the challenges of modeling a small geography like Littleton. Not only is it a small geography, but it's on the border of counties, which makes it uniquely difficult in terms of the way economic models are typically constructed. It is very well served by highway, which is great for the town, but makes, use the economics term, leakage quite a unique problem. There's things coming in and out. We've also talked about this scenario where the majority of people who work in Littleton, live in Littleton, don't work in Littleton. And then given the level of the median household income in the town, given the level of educational attainment, the types of jobs that would be created in a revitalization of the common might not necessarily be the kind of jobs that Littleton residents would want. If they're going to be retail jobs, food service jobs, those kinds of things, they're not necessarily going to be the kind of jobs that the existing residents would find appealing. So these are issues that we are going to delve into a little bit in the market analysis and more so in the economic impact analysis. But before we do that EI work, again, we need to read and react to what comes out of UTIL's work, but also we would at some point need to talk about economic modeling approaches with you folks, and I can, I don't know if this is the time, but lay out the full menu of options that are available to you, talk to you about some of the strengths and weaknesses of those approaches, and then we can decide on the one that we would like to take that would best be able to communicate local impacts. I don't know if your EEA work needs statewide impact, but we can do that, and anything in between. So those are some key things that we would need to discuss. Again, and one of the key factors in that is external audience. So you asked me a question, Mike, I remember in the interview about what is your experience in presenting and communicating these topics. It all begins with who are we even going to be talking to decide how are we going to talk about it, but also that feeds back into what modeling approach are we going to take, what tools are we going to use, what stones are we going to overturn and look under. So that's the quick stuff on our end. I don't know if you wanted, if there's anything I left out that you wanted to bring up, or we'll turn it over to back to Julie.
Yeah, no, I think you covered everything well. I think, on the EI stuff, as Rod mentioned, part of it is getting guidance from you guys about what you want to be conveying in terms of the impacts. And the second part is also how you plan to use them, right? There's an art and science about the things that happen in economic impact. I mean, you could just simply say, well, we want to do the thing that creates the most jobs, but, politically, that's not necessarily the best route for a city, right? So these are the kinds of things that, there's the side, we can count the beans, but there's also, well, what kind of beans do you want, right? So that come into play. So I think that's a conversation we can continue to have, and obviously is something that is a little bit more later stage in the project, but I think is an important one to at least frame early so that we can come back to it at a later date. I think now might be a good time to turn back to Julie.
So, before I do that, I want to see if there's any overarching questions.
I'm pretty sure the committee and folks in the audience probably also have questions, so I want to start off with the committee and we'll move to the audience. I'm just going to start arbitrarily with Anna, she's here.
So thank you for all the work and for putting everything together in this wonderful graphic. So one of the questions that I have is around the scenarios and the number of scenarios. If you could describe why the numbers are changing, because originally we had established 4, and now
4 or
I
6.
see on the chart that it says prepare scenarios 3 with an asterisk, and then by the time we get to revised scenarios, it's 2. So what happened to the 4?
So after discussing this with Michael, what we determined was the 3 would be future-based type scenarios or projected, and also we need to compare that to an existing conditions or sort of a no change, if you will.
Mhm.
So that would be the 4th, and then moving from that, when we provide the 2 sort of future again, it'd be based upon sort of a no change existing. So that you could have.
So we are actually starting with 4?
Yes, it's,
Okay.
yes, total 4.
You always couldn't do it without current conditions.
Exactly.
Right, right. Well, I just see the different numbers, that's why I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
Sure.
Thank
Okay,
you
so
for that.
that's good. And can I just keep going with questions? Okay.
Sure.
So originally, we were to have 9 committee meetings. We have 8 listed on here. Is another one floating, or what's your thought on that one?
The one that is in question, I guess I could say, is I'll go back to the timeline real quick so that I can show you towards the end when we're working in zoning, there is a need for a public hearing, and what I didn't know, and again, we can make this change, is whether the committee would want to have one of those hearings be a part of your official meetings. If not, we would add back a separate committee meeting. So I essentially combined the public hearing that you see in April with what would have been a committee meeting. But again, we're completely open to what is needed. And I did make some assumptions about when your committee would meet, so also we could change that.
Yeah. Well, in terms of that 9th meeting, I thought so by a public meeting, you're talking about a public meeting to get feedback?
Yes.
Okay, because I thought those were separate from the 9. So what I'm doing here is just making sure that
Right.
we have allocated what we originally set out to request
Exactly.
in the RFP.
Yes.
So under task 2C, it talks about 9 committee meetings, and then the other items are going to be in task 4A, B, C, and D.
Right.
So they are separate, so maybe we could keep that meeting number 9 as a floating meeting for
Sure.
when we need it?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Emma's taking notes, thank you for that, Emma. So we'll make sure that we make those revisions and have that sent.
So one of the, so in terms of the zoning, originally I thought we had 2 different zoning pieces of work. And what I see in here is the zoning framework, draft zoning and amendments. And I'm presuming, so I'm in December, so I'm presuming that that's the zoning based off of what develops from the scenarios and the economic impact.
Yes.
But wasn't there also supposed to be an initial set of zoning for understanding there was a zoning assessment and a zoning diagnostic?
Yes.
So where do those come into play?
So actually, the boxes are also estimations of the time it would take to develop the final product. So in this case, where I've added zoning framework, that is the time that we would do that initial diagnostic. So what do you have on your books? What are we looking at in terms of these dimensional changes that potentially could be needed? We then would prepare the initial diagnostic report. And we move that right into, so where I have draft zoning, that's actually as we are creating the framework for what you intend to have for amendments, and that would be reported, that draft zoning timeframe is also to draft the changes themselves. Because what ends up happening is when you're deep into looking into these parts of zoning and language, you often want to, as you're reporting on it, you often want to then sort of start to frame out how that language would look. So it's sort of a parallel effort.
There's another piece, I think, I don't mean to interrupt, but there's another piece that I found missing, but I'm assuming it's embedded here, I hope it is, and that is that one of the missions, it's clearly stated in the RFP, and you responded to it, I didn't see it here, and that is that there are a few, how many we're not sure, in the town's collection of bylaws and regulations that may not or are not in compliance with federal or state law.
Right.
Those need to be quickly identified and cures suggested.
Yes.
It's up to the planning board, which has the power to, as we're advance that, and then finally, obviously, the town meeting has to approve. So there has to be sort of explicit effort made to, where are we out of sorts with respect to law?
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
So, and again, I can absolutely change this sort of order, but where I wrote regs, and again, this just sort of to just keep this really condensed so you could see it all, is where after we've taken a real deep look into the zoning, we then would have a better understanding as to how the zoning relates to your stormwater bylaw, your wetlands bylaw, all of these important other pieces of regulation, and then be able to create the language that's potentially needed to make that change.
Right.
Those can actually happen parallel as well. But, sort of in terms of seeing where that final product would be, it would be while we're drafting the amendment language for zoning.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So from a timing perspective, both those, the diagnostic and the assessment, can be done at the same time?
Yes.
Doesn't need to be one first or sooner or anything?
It's best to take a look at the zoning and do the diagnostic as the initial startup. But as we're doing that and we're collecting the information that we need, we'll have, other team members take a look at how does this relate to zoning at that time.
Yeah, so if we could just see it in
Right.
there so that we're all on the same page about when it's being done, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure.
Are you all set, or is there more?
So, let me see where it is. So task 2D is key stakeholder meetings. And that's the property owners, businesses, residents, and there are up to 8 of those different meetings. I don't see them on here.
So that's where we have, in the very initial part of this project, stakeholder identification in parallel in a time frame where we start to conduct stakeholder, we're calling them interviews.
Okay.
They don't necessarily need to be interviews. It obviously is something that we want your feedback on in terms of how we approach the key stakeholders, but that's something that we know will need to happen pretty early on.
Okay, all right.
It's,
So I just wanted to make sure that we are actually going to then be utilizing those 8 additional meetings on top of what we already see here.
Yes.
Okay, fabulous.
Okay.
That's what I have so far. Thanks.
Sure.
Jonathan, you have?
Okay, so, you have a lot of different things at the very beginning. Are you confident that you can do all of these? I mean, particularly the prepared scenarios seems like the biggest part of it all, and that's like a month or less than a month to do that. So is that your usual, time frame in which you can prepare this kind of,
It's compact, but the beauty of this is I have amazing team members, and so what we really are going to do is we're all going to be working pretty much in parallel on preparing, the information that we need. Obviously, Fort Point and my associates are going to be really trying to work right up front in looking at, do we have initial conversations with different stakeholders? What's the information we need to garner? But right from the start, after that, our team members will be able to really start getting going on their work and looking at design, potential design elements, and starting looking at marketing analysis. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but we need to do, that's a lot of the upfront data analysis, the number crunching, the information assessment that can be done while we're talking with stakeholders. And that'll also equip us with information to have when we're talking with them. We do hope to have a larger workshop, if at all possible, to get that going within this frame, but that's something we're going to have to see how that plays out.
okay, and I have a couple more questions. One of them is, whom do you see, maybe you want us to answer that question, but whom do you see as stakeholders? To me, it's like everybody. The town of Littleton has come up with this master plan, and I think, therefore, everybody in town is really a stakeholder. And to my mind, that's really the impetus for this idea that we need to do something about the common. It's not some small group of people who just happen to somehow or other be located there.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I'll let my team members talk as well, but we really looked at that there's almost two categories, we think, and we want to work with you on this, but of stakeholders where you're right, there is the public at large that obviously whatever happens here is really going to make a difference to them, the residents, people who visit Littleton. And that, however, there are more direct, let's say, stakeholders in which if they own property within the common, if they have business interests within the common, or if they have a business in the common area, any property owner within the planning area is clearly going to have to be, we want to communicate with them directly because that could change things directly for them. So I think that we want to have this sort of parallel. And I think it's for us what we typically do is we look at assessors' information and we try to really garner what type of property owner there are. And from that, we would want to work with you on identifying folks that either you've already talked to, you have an understanding perhaps of what their perspective might be, and what conversations do we need to have. But that's a little different than the sort of larger public because that's a different message.
Yeah, and a couple of things. Master plans are inherently public processes. So there is one is you want to open that up to get the feedback loop from the community in general. And I think that's just the way master plans generally operate. But one of the things I find important about a key stakeholder process, and it's usually defined by the project itself, is using it as a data point. There's so much that secondary data can tell you about, a market assessment, for example. But being able to talk with, whether it's business leaders or property owners, you can get a better sense of certain things about that don't necessarily uncover themselves in data. A good example is we're doing work with mass development right now in a program that's called TDI, Transformative Development Initiatives, in each of the gateway cities. Well, part of what we were talking about there is what commercial capacity is in these very small neighborhoods in larger urban areas. And there's some secondary data that you can look at there, whether it's CoStar, Velasas, but not all that data is captured because there may be buildings that are vacant, they're not being advertised, so what's going on there? So for us, a key stakeholder interviews, we're talking with real estate experts in those communities to better understand, okay, well, we know the data's saying this, but what else do we need to know? And that allows us to weave a story around this kind of market potential. This is a different process in some ways, but at the same time, that's the way I see the stakeholder part. So there's the public piece, but then there's also, hey, data can take you to the water's edge, but there may be some things you need to supplement the data with, and that's where the stakeholders can be helpful.
it would be nice to talk to some of the business owners in the area to ask them questions like, if the majority of the workers in the town don't work in the town, what kind of businesses do you think would be viable in the town common when the town has a small daytime population? What do you envision could go here? What kind of businesses do you think your business could survive on after 6 p.m. Or weekend only, patronage? I think those are the kinds of things that we would want to run by folks and have them get a better idea.
What are the limitations you're seeing with expanding your business or opportunities you see or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, if XYZ road was closed to pedestrian traffic to expand green space, like how does that affect, what does that mean for you and your peers? Yeah, those are kinds of things that we can guess at, but it would be nice to ask somebody directly to their face.
And that leads to the other question I have, it seems very much like you understand this, that, unlike, say, if you're talking about Boston or a big city where lots of people work in the city and lots of people live in the city, here, we're not, at least I'm not sure that the usual kind of goals of economic development have much to do with what Littletonians want for the common. As you yourself said, Littletonians don't say, well, gee, if we could develop the common more, we'd have more jobs in Littleton. Most people in Littleton don't think of creating jobs in Littleton as something that's, I don't think at least.
Jonathan, I'm stunned. I'm just stunned. People do think about it. They do.
I don't think it's a driver.
Not yet.
But people want a walkable community.
Yes.
And they want access to places to eat, places to get a cup of coffee, whatever the thing is. And it's interesting. We do understand this, and I think in our role at the Donahue Institute, and I think these guys and other master plan have come across this too, is that this kind of economic development dance is different in each city and town, right? We did a study several years ago in Greater Brockton about wastewater and in the potential of unlocking economic development around some regionalization efforts there. But what was very interesting in talking to folks in the communities around Brockton is, well, some really wanted it for economic development, and some specifically didn't. And that tension that exists in it. And Julie and I worked together years ago at the Boston Redevelopment Authority, and so the community process of every single thing that would come up is, people really wanted. I live in Forest Hills by Jamaica Plain, and they're doing a redevelopment there, and you had the folks who wanted huge development, you want the folks who wanted medium size, and you wanted folks who wanted none, which was basically a large exercise in everybody arguing with each other. But there's that tension in community, right, about what you want out of your economic development, and each community is going to be a little bit different, and you have different opinions of that in town.
Yeah, there's inherent tensions even in the master plan. You see that some of the folks that you look at some of the things that people say they love about Littleton, small town feel, rural community, some of the things they want, walk, bike options. Well, if you have a rural community, things are very far apart and they're not conducive to walking and biking. So if you want things to be walkable and bikeable, you got to put them closer together, which sort of gets rid of some of that rural feeling. There's also this tension between conservation, agriculture, open space. All of these things. This tension is present even in the small town of Littleton. So. We are obviously cognizant of that. The hardest part of this falls on their shoulders to design something that sort of addresses some of these. But these are some of the things that.
Well, just to build off that, I think that's what's really important is that eventually we'll be able to give that visualization of what all of this means. If you have more density, what is that going to look like? If you want walkability, what will that look like? And I think that's really important to get people's understanding of the implications of these economic pieces.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. You okay? You, John? Okay. So, because my main question has to do with the outreach and the timing and sequence of things. So I thought I heard that the market analysis was going to inform the scenarios, but the schedule has the market analysis after the scenarios. No?
They're parallel.
Well, actually,
Well, I see, I have a timeline here I got it ahead in advance, so.
yes, we changed that.
Okay.
We changed that, and I hope, were you able to get a larger copy? I will send one to you directly. What we realized is that we would need to bump back the market analysis even a little bit further so that the first round of scenarios
Okay.
would occur.
All right, so I can throw that away.
And I would actually add, we can start on the kind of the existing zoning scenario in the meantime while they're working on the market analysis.
Okay.
That's something we're very comfortable with.
Okay, good. And then we have 2 public feedback forums that I understand, and then I think we have 3 in the budget, but I think one is probably the town meeting. It's probably counted as a feedback session.
The first workshop, the open house, and the first public meeting are sort of what we've envisioned as the more open,
So the workshop in June
yes.
is a public forum type
Yes,
thing.
yes.
And then you have the open house in August timeframe.
About that, yes.
And then I guess, does the town meeting count as one as well, I guess? Or that's more just a presentation?
Actually, we didn't count that as
Okay.
although it is, but we didn't count that as sort of an open.
Okay, so it's really those 2. The
And
August.
then the end, the public meeting to
Related to
have
the zoning.
The zoning.
Related to zoning. Okay,
Correct.
so focusing on the first 2.
Yes.
The summer ones. So what do you envision being the agendas for those? Without getting into the presentation method, but generally speaking, what do you think the agenda is going to be?
Well, we thought that at the first workshop, we'd really want to lay out the analysis, the market analysis that has occurred, and then the scenarios, so the initial scenarios, presenting what that looks like. Very visual. I think that it's important for us to maybe have an opportunity for folks to touch and have the maps down and really, feel like they are working at something, because that's very important. But we also wanted to have an open house, and we had a little bit of, we were trying to figure out, well, when's the best time for that more. So the workshop would be a little bit more of the sort of traditional feel, and us presenting, here's where we're at, here's what we want your feedback. But the open house we envision to be something that would hopefully really get people excited. They'll see a lot of the scenarios up on the posters, they'll be able to all get a sense of what this looks like. We'll be able to, at that point, really have some information on the economic impacts, and it'll be a place that people can come in, provide their feedback, and it'll be like a very interactive, movement of visuals and information that is a real exchange between our team and the community. People can come and go as they need be, and we'll have a longer time frame. So that's what we thought had worked pretty well at one of your initial master plan type of forums. And so, again, we're open to change, but that's how we envisioned at that point when we have the scenarios completed.
So talk to me a little bit about the renderings, because the renderings are after those 2 sessions, the 2 public sessions. And so what do you envision the use of the renderings be? Because I thought that would kind of come into play for the second place for some people just don't see 2-dimensionally. And so I thought maybe that was going to come into play before the open house.
It's a very good point, and we may need to adjust that. I guess, at first when we put this together, we were thinking that the renderings are going to supply the plan with additional visuals for people who may not have been engaged, and they can understand what density and height and all that, the differences look like. But there might be an opportunity for a couple of those to be ready, after, I'll have Kenan talk about this, but once the scenarios are starting to be developed. Does that sound reasonable?
I think it's difficult to communicate it without any type of 3-dimensional imagery. And generally what we've done in the past is rather than, like a rendering that shows, the architectural character at this scale, it would be more about the massing of the building and how it relates to the context around it, and also using that as a diagram that we can use in our slide. So a lot of times we'll put in connection nodes and arrows to bike infrastructure, for example, that might exist, how you access parking and things like that. And we found that that's more effective in the public than just using a plan.
Right.
So that's, I think I agree, that's a tool we should move up and use for that presentation.
Okay. And then,
Hey, Gary,
Go
real
ahead.
quick before you move
Yeah.
on, I have a question related to all this. So one particular comment that I heard loud and clear from residents and even from folks who have worked on this process was, in order for us to keep moving forward with the implementation, when we first put this out to bid and said to folks, we're going to focus on revitalizing the common, and we moved away from using the term a master plan for the common because folks thought, oh my gosh, here we go again, we're going to reinvent the wheel. Didn't we just do that? So when we go to communicate and even lay out the workshop, I think it will be important to set it apart and as very distinct from what's been done in the past, because I'm concerned that folks might get it in their head that, oh, we've already done that, why are we wasting our money again? And we really want to make it different in terms of look and feel and
it can,
experience.
well, I think the feel, personally, I think the feel can be similar, but I don't think we want to cover the same ground necessarily.
Correct.
again.
Well, it can't cover the same
Right,
ground
so we hope that you learned from some of the
Yeah.
you know, the goofy and fun ideas that we had, you know, helipads every places and stuff like that. But I think what's different in this case is that was a brainstorming type exercise and, like, you know, a wish list, and really wasn't grounded in anything. It was more, like, hey, what would you think? How could you see this working?
Right, exactly.
And this is a little more grounded because it's going to have some economics and market stuff built around it, plus some more focused stakeholder interviews. I would think that would be.
I agree, but to
It
this.
still has to be explained, I think. That would be a point that you're
Yes.
making, is that
And I
explained.
heard you say that, you know, if there are blocks that people could move, I don't know how necessary that is at this
Well,
juncture.
before we give it, it's too bad we don't have the meeting downstairs in room 103, because sitting on the wall down there is basically the result of the residents basically playing with models. And there you can sort of see rather graphically what I call the emotional response to, what we're going to do with the common. So I think the message here is that whatever next step we do, it's got to basically be a break with that. It's going to have to be far more, shall we say, a very, very good movie that says, I didn't know that.
Yes.
All right?
No,
It has
loud
to
and
move us
clear.
forward, yeah.
Yeah, it has to basically break new ground. I'm sorry to interrupt the.
No, you're absolutely right. I think, you know, I liken this to a process that we do when we do a municipal harbor plan, for example. I know it's not related per se, but in terms of what you ultimately have to end up with here versus a larger master planning process is a blueprint for moving forward, a design per se, a design potential, which is a lot different than, oh, here's what we really wish for that would happen across a larger community. We definitely understand, yeah.
Thank you.
I just have, I think maybe one more point.
Okay, good.
We have two state highways intersecting this area.
Yeah.
So I assume can you talk a little bit about what your engagement you're going to have with Mass DOT before the June session?
I was just wondering what you guys thought, but I know what we need to do. So fortunately, in the permitting work that we do, we have established relationships with agency staff, which includes MassDOT. And so I think when we had talked about it, it's not necessarily shown within this timeline here, but really, let's say within data collection, pre-planning, we had in our scope to have some pre-planning conversations with agency representatives to let them know this is what we're doing, we need your feedback, how are you going to be engaged in this process? And fortunately, you know, we do have those established relationships to do that. Jamie, our firm president, has already sort of outlined who should we, you know, connect with, because absolutely we understand that it's not in the town's control.
Yeah, so I just don't want to come up with some great ideas that get killed 4 months from now because we all like it and then
Yeah, the hard part is,
says veto no.
I mean, you have a state route that goes right through the center of the commons, so, rejiggering that in any way would be.
And I have to say, I don't think I've ever done scenario testing that's not on a state road. So we're very familiar with it. Yeah.
Right to the middle of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Mike, do you have something for the group?
Here?
Yeah.
I don't have any comments other than to remind everybody that no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. And, I mean, I like everything I've heard. I think you guys have raised some great points, but I'm more interested in letting the pros from Dover start to go to work and for us to sit back and let the process start to unfold. And then I think our most valuable input will come as we get a little further down. So,
Okay.
My turn?
not that there are any enemies in this process, sorry. Just want to make sure I clarify.
Can you put the yellow map?
Yeah, sure.
Yellow zoning map? Because I have your first, like, homework assignment for you.
Okay. This one?
We even have it printed.
No, I wanted the bigger one, not that one,
I'll just move forward to the,
common area.
okay, we've
It's one
got
of
it.
our last
Okay.
slides.
Okay, here we go.
So the town of Littleton is engaged in discussions with one of the landowners in the common. There was another one that I think was bigger than that.
This little zoom in, I think is the
Can you
biggest we
can you make
got.
that bigger? No, that one doesn't do it. Well, actually,
You
that
can
one's
zoom
not-
in within
There it is, that's
PowerPoint.
good.
I-
So the town of Littleton is involved with discussions with one of the landowners adjacent to the common property, this area up in here.
Would it be better on the aerial, perhaps?
No, I guess.
Okay.
So this is an abandoned 40B right now, and the town is talking about possibly buying the property and their thought is to put either the town offices up there, to revitalize, move the town offices up there, and some senior housing up there. So we have a car dealership in front of us, and the town has engaged in conversations with the owner of the car dealership and the people that own the property behind it about a possible buying the land, swapping the land. In order to put town offices there, we really need frontage. We really need a presence on Great Road. And the problem is there's 12 acres of land involved in what the town's talking about. So the thought is to maybe do a swap with the car dealership in front, maybe get the cars in the back and get some frontage there. So we had a meeting last week, and when I told them that we were going to be talking to you folks about design scenarios and everything else, the thought was to maybe come up with some scenarios of trading of the land and putting what the town wants in there, which is most of the town offices there, maybe some senior housing out in the back out there, because it is in the common, it is walkable to everything out there, and maybe some sort of design and some swapping with the car dealership where the cars are and the piece of land as it goes up the hill, as well about a scenario of a build-out over there.
Okay.
So if we could get maybe some rough ideas about what it would look like, and access is obviously an issue. There's a couple of other scenarios. Well, you'll see. If you look at there's a couple of other pieces of property that are for sale and that are available on the frontage, but we need some visualization of what other options. And
Okay.
like I said, we've been actively involved with talking to the people in that area for the past couple of months, and it would be helpful if we could have sort of a roadmap to kind of get an idea of what we can actually do out there.
Okay.
So, I mean, this brings up the issue of what is the area in which you're working? You've just had shall we say, an announcement, or at least a clue about, I hate to use the pun, but it's appropriate, the fluidity of the situation. Because
It's an option, it's on the table, and it's available to us now. It
Yeah.
may not be available in 6 months, that's why
Right.
the sooner we found it was made available to us, it was offered to the town. Do they want to buy it? Do they want, the owner of the property is thinking about offering it to developers and everything else. We're having like a first flush at it, and it's been a couple of months into that.
Okay.
So it'd be nice if we could get some sort of general idea of what we could actually do out there.
Okay.
Rather than just talking
Right.
in abstract about, we could put something, but we want to talk about, and maybe that involves talking to Keith and Anthony about what the town needs are. And like I said, we talked about, there's 12 acres there, we talked about senior housing, Gino. For out there, it would be a perfect spot to put some housing out there because it is walkable to the common.
Right,
It's
right.
right there, so a whole package deal.
Okay.
the reason I mentioned the fluidity is the fact that the other large infrastructure project envisioned so far, at least it's in the, what we'll call planning stage and feasibility stage. Well, it's past feasibility, it's now more in what do we do next? It has to do with waste management. So it's one of the major components here.
Wastewater management.
Yep.
Yes. And at the moment, the boundaries for that, the boundaries for that remain this way. They were originally defined to include property, obviously on this side of, what do call this side of 495.
Right.
And now it's shrunk a bit. There's,
Okay.
the folks who own the land for IBM are not prepared yet to participate. I'll just use that, okay?
Okay.
But how far down Great Road, I think that the original map had it, and this is interesting, short of the car dealership.
Yeah.
Is that right, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and because of technical reasons, the extension down King Street, moving, shall we say, toward the schools, all right? Basically, since this building is part of that, and there's already existing services, it would include this as well as the center. Okay?
Okay.
So, but I have to say that at the moment, exactly where the boundaries are of where the sewer district is going to be remains undefined to the level that you would need, I think, to basically, oh, this is it. What's very interesting is if you're going to do current status of where we are now, and then you have to begin adding, well, what kind of infrastructure would you have here? I mean, I think the question then becomes a very, shall we say, a compelling one to address what Mark has raised and what the other questions have been raised about, because what is the common? What place is it?
Right.
Where is this place?
Right.
Now, historically, just so that you know, the reason that we're in this is because it's for historic, because as a farming area, Littleton didn't develop logically. It was not influenced by Roman architectural sensitivities. Oh, it's here, it's there,
Right.
and you now see the result of that. The area that we're talking, sort of not with precision, is the common. Most people regard that as the center of Littleton, and that's its place. So we're trying to, as it were, give that place some life more than, a couple of gasoline stations and stuff, okay?
So we are talking about a potential zoning change. We're talking about the purple, the end of the purple.
Right.
And those little dots up there are abandoned houses that
Right.
was of defunct 40B. So we're talking about encompassing that, whether we get it further down this way or from the car dealership way. We need to look at build-out and design criteria for that.
Right. Okay.
Because that's available now. Who knows how long it will be available.
Right. Oh, I don't know if my team members have something to add on that, but I think hopefully moving from what is on the books now, what you can do, having understanding of where there might need to be some expansion in terms of infrastructure will come out there, and informed by the economic analysis will move that way. But yeah, at some point, we are going to need to determine, okay, are we in the right spot here?
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
the boundaries of the sewer district are in flux, I mean, how do they really balance that? How do you guys?
Are
Well-
you looking to this study to guide that?
Excuse me, please.
Are you looking to this study to guide the decision on the boundary?
I think when you look at the history, the answer is to some extent, I guess the way I look at it, the other members may feel differently, is to me the wastewater management will help what goes on above ground. And what goes above ground is where the people are, where housing will be, where services will be. That's what matters. And what you've heard described here is an idea and approach for this building, for seniors, walkability. It's basically talking about the major part of what we'll call a potential area of the common. So if it means that the sewering, as it were, has to, as it were, be put there for functional as well as economic reasons, that might help drive where things are placed.
And to add to that, one thing that I worked on a project in Sudbury for their corridor Route 20, and one thing that actually was brought to light was there is a lot of, I don't want to say constraints, but environmental considerations to be made in terms of what the build-up can be,
Yeah.
and where you can have certain elements of development in addition to the zoning, in addition to what you want to change. And that paints that picture. So that could also inform the boundary.
One of the things you had in your list, just to be clear, it's a serious problem regardless of all the scenarios, you had, in addition to waste management, you have no extra charge, you have parking. And I don't like to talk about parking because I think it's going to, never mind. It's parking along with the others, but parking is a serious consideration for even, shall we say, even the businesses who are trying to, as it were, make it. That includes restaurants, large and small, but services, as well as people. We start putting housing in there, where do you, to get to work, what do they use?
Right, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'd
So-
like to turn, yeah, I'm sorry.
Real quick, so, based
Yes, I
off
was
based off the original proposal, what did you say down there?
Nothing, I guess I was done, that's all.
Oh, sorry. So, taking a look at the zoning that we have in the master plan, the village common district, which is the red, and then the hatched, which is the Beaverbrook overlay district. So, those are the two that, based off the proposal, I was thinking we intended for this work to cover. More specifically around the Beaver Brook, I guess I was seeing it more as that's the point, that's where it's all built out. So how does what currently exists at the point complement what we plan to do in the common?
Yes.
That was kind of
One point I'd like to make, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, is that, so the area of influence is going to be studied, obviously, because right on, that is a point, literally, that would be a connection to the area and then other parts of town. But when we ultimately end up doing the design scenario, we do want to have realistic designs that can be then further implemented. So for example, we won't need to provide design scenarios per se on an area that's been set and
Correct.
right.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that's where it comes tightened. if you will.
Yeah, and I think one part of the scenario analysis that might help guide the discussion of the boundary is that one step we'll have to do is an understanding of like what is likely to change and what is likely not to change. Because I think this is mostly an infill scenario, and so that might actually be more limited than what we think. And so I'm wondering if that in conjunction with an understanding of the character and where it kind of feels like this place ends in terms of the architectural character and use, the way pedestrian infrastructure and walkability works, right? Because there's a certain distance where it starts to feel like it's too far. That might give us, as a team, kind of a first pass at the boundary that we can then distribute to you to kind of confirm our hunches. Because I think you're right, we're not necessarily going to be testing everything, but we just want to know, like, how far do you want us to look at the, for those infill sites?
Yeah.
And it seems clear that, both districts are in play, but the majority of the testing will be on the south side of 495.
Agreed,
Sure.
yeah, that's,
I mean, how do you want to address this? I mean, I'll give you guys my opinion, it can be different than Jonathan's, but it can be different than Andrew's as to where the boundaries are, so.
well, it's good. I'd like to believe that when the reality of what the economics are of Littleton through the common, as seen through the common, become apparent, we're going to have to do some, shall we say, revision. All of us will have to do revision of what we think of what is possible and feasible, and what is needed to stay within that boundary. So I think the base analysis, which I think you're going to get to pretty quickly, because of, the shall we say, the base economics of the situation as it now exists.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's certainly going to be areas that are just not ripe for development or redevelopment based on a market analysis, and therefore, okay, well, perhaps that's for a later time to revisit, and therefore we focus on what's most viable. I think that's.
And land use of parcels becomes, really rises pretty quickly as you
Yeah.
proceed through various parcels of the common.
What I don't want to see us do is draw a line somewhere.
Arbitrarily,
ar-
right, yeah.
What I call arbitrary, but also that limits our ability to what the redevelopment could be because of, say, adjacency of parking or road networks or something like that, because we just happen to draw a line here.
Right.
And
Which, I mean, gets at kind of what Mark's point was just a little bit ago, although separate from the common, but in the sphere of influence.
Let's see if there's anyone in the audience who.
yes, they've been very patient.
Yeah.
Sure, thanks. My name is James Kennedy. I'm a resident also president of the Business Association, and also very active in a larger group of commercial property owners, business owners, residents who have been involved in hoping that the common is developed to its fullest based on the master plan they've done. So it's kind of an exciting time and happy to be here. So a few questions I had, and part of it, Mike brought up the sewer as kind of driving force for economic development because you have to fix underground before you have improvements above ground. Part of the decision-making process in whether the town approves the sewer or not would hinge on risk. Obviously, the town wants to know that if it signs the dotted line for a large financial outlay loan to build a sewer, what's the risk? Also, what's the reward? What's the tax impact, economic development impact? How much revenue can we expect? Will that be all part of your planning or your study prior to the town meeting in October? What can we expect in October when we have our town meeting?
So part of our economic impact analysis would be to estimate property tax changes as a result of the development scenarios that we get. So we would do the market analysis, which would turn into the scenarios. Then once those are refined to a couple of options, we would do the economic impact of those scenarios, which would include what we envision doing. I think it's on my slide somewhere, but I can describe it just as well. Once we get an idea of what the buildings are and what their potential uses could be, there are average employment patterns. So a restaurant typically has X number of employees per square feet. A retail establishment has X number of employees per square feet. So we can fill these hypothetical spaces with employees. We would know once we have an industry, we know what their income levels would be. We know what the average amount of revenue that would turn through these places would be to justify that amount of employment, and so on. And we can use that to figure out some estimates of property tax revenue. So that we would include in terms of our analyses. But I would add, or just merely note that I think everybody here realizes this, is that putting in sewerage increases the realm of what is possible for the area, but as we all know, doesn't guarantee that certain development would go in there. So,
Sure.
We can give an idea of what we think those spaces could be used and what they would look like if they were fully utilized.
Okay, that's helpful. Another question, this is more residents as well as business owners, the impact of the development on safety and the traffic patterns. Is that part of your study?
Not on our end. I don't know if we're looking at that.
We're not, so correct me if I'm wrong, we're not necessarily looking at the traffic impacts.
Right.
But I think the walkability is a part of at least our analysis and making sure that anything we're drawing has a safe buffer, let's say for pedestrians or bike facilities if they're separated or not, and build off of the standards that the town already adopted. And I think that our spatial plans, it's not just putting buildings, it's understanding how cars access those buildings into the private space of parking beyond that, and also how you access it as a pedestrian who's walking. So we can address some of those in terms of the design, and I think that's something we think is important as an outcome, so that if a developer or a business comes who wants to expand on their property to the city has something to show that is a visual thing that is kind of lays out those guidelines of why that's important.
Adding to that, once we have the scenarios really developed, essentially, there is some basic traffic analysis that can be done, trip generation, for example. So if we have an idea of, oh, okay, perhaps X type of use could be here, it's a, 100-seat restaurant, sounds kind of big, but then that would generate, based on using the U.S. transportation standards we have, and we've done this for other permitting processes, just get a sense of what that trip generation would be. Now, that's not a detailed traffic analysis. That certainly could be done as a companion piece after the planning is over. But it would give the town a sense of this is what you might be looking at if this was a scenario. So.
I'd be less concerned about what traffic impacts of onesies, twosies type of development might be, or opportunity, maybe collectively maybe.
Right.
But we can't ignore the fact that this is this is a bad traffic, this is the worst traffic area in town,
Yes.
adjacent to the highway and everything else. And there's a lot of commuters coming in here every day at rush hour, going from Groton. Don't do anything in Littleton, just driving from Groton to Boston.
Right.
So I would hope you're gonna be looking at traffic impacts of any redevelopment and reconfiguration is gonna be
Yes.
on the current traffic patterns.
Yes, we could take a look at that at not specific, you do an existing condition, so what do you have here and what is the potential trip generation?
Yeah.
And then compare that to what would be one of the final scenarios.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how you could see the difference.
I have a general question on the subject
Sorry, I
area.
have one more.
Yeah.
Oh.
Last one.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
So, can you pull up your map again of the area?
This one, or?
Yeah, that one,
Okay.
sure. So, there's a big space there of all white, kind of carved out almost. Is that residential property? Why is that excluded?
On which
Robinson-
side?
Robinson
This
Road?
side or?
Yeah, that side, yeah. It's kind of carved out.
It's zoned residential, yeah.
Is that residential?
It's all residential.
It's Adams
Okay,
Road.
so this is just a question, and, you know, you could say it's a bad question or a good one, whatever you want. Why is that not even considered as an option for being part of this common study?
So I just would start by saying it is in the sense that what we're looking at for scenarios would entail what is the nature of the surrounding area to this, which is that residential, and how does that relate to what could happen in the common? It's sort of the chicken and egg in the sense that, you know, you're looking at what could be and how that relates to the surrounding existing. We wouldn't look at redevelopment scenarios for an existing of that nature because we anticipate that that's not going to change. There's going to be residents there for years and years. And so therefore, what does it mean to those residents? It's a connecting factor. Does that make sense?
I would add to that as well that we were building off of the master plan study in terms of the zoning districts, and my understanding, and the committee can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a general approach to residential that's applied across the entire city and only in a mixed-use district, which is sort of, you know, what the common is.
Yeah.
Does that change and allow for multi-uses mixed with residential?
Can I answer that one too, since I've been on here forever?
Yeah, you're the planning board, right?
The problem has always been
I'd love to
this
hear from you.
skinny little part right in through here. Some of these lots are only 100 feet wide. This is all Robinson Road, and the people on Robinson Road do not want any encroachment of the commercial component down Robinson Road. It's been an issue here. It's probably not going to change. There's an association of the people in Robinson Road who don't want to see any commercial
You're talking Adams.
widening. In Adams Street on the other side as well. Some of those lots are only 100 feet deep.
Okay, fair enough. I just had to ask the
It's
question.
been a
because it is
issue
kind
for
of
it's
kind of
27
an odd carve, you know, on the,
And
on the
what
district.
makes it, I've just been reminded, since I took it for granted, what made me reminded, ironically, the town has just purchased on Robinson Road, probably historically one of the most interesting, shall we say, mixed historic building, it's a very old home, sitting right on Robinson Road. It's quite visible from Great Road as you're going down. So it's quote, in the common, and it's now designated as a historic site, and it has to be taken care of accordingly. So it gives you an idea of, it gives a sense.
Is Cataldo's in the district?
No.
No?
On the other side.
Just what I mean, that's commercial.
Well, if you look at the master
it's
plan
agricultural.
map, James, you'll find out where the overlays are.
Okay.
You'll see it how. Are there any other, I'm sorry, yes, please. Please identify yourself.
My name is Gino. Thank you, Mark, for the comment you made before. My name is Gino Ferraroni. I'm on the Board of Health, the Vice Chairman. I've been in town for 36 years. Now, I ran for selectmen. People, they sponsor me to run for selectmen. They said, Gino, you got to find out what's going on in town, because there were so many projects. Thank God they postponed until November. I guess your people is going to be in that particular pile. My question would be, is this the first or the second company that is involved in the sewage treatment?
What?
Sewage.
They're not involved in waste management.
Okay.
They're doing planning for the common.
Okay, so what you're doing is exactly, you make a design, am I correct? Okay, so you have nothing to do, so my question would be, I was going to ask, how much would it cost the people in town would like, they asked me, find out how much it's going to cost. But I think it's going to be only for the design, $1.5 million, but nothing to do about the project itself, am I correct?
This has nothing to do with the
Sewage.
sewer and the common.
Yeah. If you, that information is public about, that's been turned out.
Thank you.
So just on that, so part of your scenario analysis is gonna be sewer or no sewer, right?
Sure.
What would happen if the good people of Littleton decide that they don't want any sewer? Then how would the common look, and what can we do? What can we make the common into?
I'm not going to lie to you guys, because I support.
Gino.
One more, what question?
No, we're,
You're limiting me one
yes,
question.
no, we're finished with
I'll
this.
see you tomorrow in Rotary.
Okay, you do that, okay. Okay. All right, are there any questions from here? All right. So there's some homework, obviously. One of them is just what do we mean by the common? And sort of, we are in a sort of which came first kind of situation. Because to some extent, without a certain kind of infrastructure, what are we talking about? So we may have two kinds of commons existing contiguous, one with and without infrastructure. I think that's what's on the horizon. Could be on the horizon. So the question is, where is that, how is that contiguous, where does that, shall we say, that point of meeting occur? Where is that? So physically, we have to come up with, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and I say this, the sewering task force will be able to identify what they have in mind for the new one, and certainly that will be available to you. Which also brings me to the fact that we've already set up a path of communication so that you can have conversations and have your questions addressed by the sewering task force, by a particular Chris Stoddard, who is basically your liaison. He already knows about you, and so he
know about him now.
and hopefully. So other information, Maren is a good start point. And she knows how to reach the rest of us who are experts, such as Mark, and who are going to become experts, such as Anna. The planning board is very significant because we're also, between the Board of Selectmen and the planning board, we are as it were, we were given birth by both of those committees. So that's why the one member we have missing tonight is a member of the Board of Selectmen, Paul Glavy. He couldn't make it, he's busy with something else, but he'll be at other meetings, and or a representative will be who they choose. Same for the planning board.
I think the other piece of homework was, I think you're going to need some ideas on stakeholders or people that you're talking to, so
Yeah.
we ought to read that too.
That process has already started at our end.
Okay,
Of trying to identify that.
okay, great.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Gino, you had one final question.
Oh, thank you, sir.
No, I just want to make sure that we got some other stuff done first. Go ahead.
We're just friends, we just like to fight. Okay, the purpose is that you only do the design, okay? And so that's why I can relate to the public. And also, like Mark made a nice comment, that they're trying to put in those 12 acres housing for the seniors. And also, I'd like to know when you are ready to start. And would it be anybody that is involved in sewerage that like to have it? But if somebody doesn't want to be connected, can you give me an answer for that? Would they have to get connected?
These guys aren't
They're not sewer.
aren't for
They're
that,
not
Gino.
sewer. They're just
They're not for
design
that.
people.
Right, so we're basically working in tandem with that
Okay.
process
Yeah.
to help inform that. And in terms of sort of the business aspect of the connection,
Yeah,
that's
They're working
where
on
we
top of the
exchange.
ground.
okay.
Yeah.
Where you're still up, you're on top of the
I
ground.
mean, obviously, they're connected pieces.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
You made a very nice presentation, all of you guys. Thank you.
All right. If there are no further questions for the Fort Point group, they have a long way to go. I want to make sure that we've got everything. Are you as satisfied as you could be, given the shall we say, the fluidity of the situation?
Yes, Yes, I think that there's obviously some things that we're going to want to follow up with you very soon.
Yes.
And as we've talked about, I think if I am sending some, requests, like, or bullet points that we want to remind you of, my understanding, we'll send that to you, Michael, and Anna, and
Yes,
Lauren.
those are the three, yeah.
And then we'll hear back from you, but I think that just to keep in mind that because there's a lot of work that's going to be done up front, you will be hearing from us quite frequently over the next few weeks, if that's
Yep,
acceptable.
give them a
Be
timeline.
par for the
So,
course, yep.
And then, yeah.
Yeah, we have kind of an
All right,
imposed
well,
deadline of June
we're
30th.
going to take are there any questions of the committee? I just want to make sure that we're not cut off from here.
No, we're fine.
They're good.
I just wanted to comment, there are probably a couple of other documents that if they haven't been sent to you, we'll try to make sure to get them to you as soon as possible, that
Okay.
might be relevant to the work.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll take a break of a couple of minutes, give you a chance to work.
Rick, aren't we done?
No?
Item 1 on the agenda, Mark.
We got a big rest of the, yeah.
We're gonna go fast, right?
Well, the rest of the.
Fast as we can.
Mike usually takes us very fast.
Boston before I
You're only just
call
having
you.
items on.
Recording the game, right?
I am recording, thank you.
Zip through it fast tonight.
I think we can get into, like, jump into it after zoning really quickly and get an understanding of what can actually fit on the site and what are regulations.
Sorry, I was just making sure we saved the notes. Perfect. Really important. Saving the notes.
That's all you have.
I guess I should have mentioned this section. The commission has been.
That was our plan today, but it was boring, right? I did drive through.
It's not because I don't like Google.
Emphasize the common area. Something we have.
You have fresh eyes.
Yes, you noticed.
Now, when you like to have access to,
Take a look.
These guys were not, they were not being
He talks about
And I can follow up with you on that. I did
incredible storage.
some,
Not mixed with the dealership,
Well,
but.
that's there's a lot of ways.
We'll take a look. And then you'll be able to see. He's describing what March is describing, the area.
Oh, yeah, very much.
we have stuff on that,
All right,
Very good.
All right.
Again, thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. God bless you. Wish you luck.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you. Take care. Nice to see you again.
Well, yeah, you and I need to talk
sketchy fashion when they were trying to.
We'll need that then.
When they were trying to put in a historic district.
Yeah. That
From
way.
years ago, and so these are all updated and beautifully done.
I think that'll be very important.
No, they might not.
Whenever there's a format,
Yeah, I would
you should really share that, be great, because, right, I would typically look for the.
There's the last one.
But I would.
My last one. Right now, they're in that. So maybe.
Something that you share as a committee. and-
No, not this committee, but the Historical Commission.
I don't know if there may be additional. I've looked through
Yeah, whether they are or
documents about the, if you're willing to do it that way, then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually,
No, it's not that
don't want to
bad.
it's quite a number of them.
What is
Sure.
going like some of the speeding down.
Right.
I need to be doing something. I don't like playing with something I don't care.
I don't like the
They own that whole
Right.
thing, chairman.
I might still pop in on areas.
I think it's a really.
All those, they're kind of like.
So, okay.
There was.
A lot of like, so the right side is all those.
I don't remember the actual.
Yeah, we got here at 5:30, or that guy was watching.
That's a lot.
Until we see the letters, I'm gonna walk down there and get a sandwich. It's fine.
Very good. No, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm gonna walk down there now and get a sandwich. I already scoped out the open.
You guys, and
I saw that you gave me a folder.
All right, guys, we're gonna have to resume.
Very much in demand.
How we were done here.
I know, I hope they'll make my train back to Situate.
No, that's, oh, what?
Yeah, lots of work to jump into right away. You guys have a.
It's okay, 30 minutes.
Not that I'm pointing at.
No, that's fine. That's going from here to anywhere.
Oh, no, I'm traveling later.
Okay, good. All right, that's good.
So good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I know.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Over there, so I can plug my.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm gonna walk down.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for leaving.
I'll figure it out. Thank you.
Immediately after when I made the statement, and they said, no, perfect, only those who's gonna.
That's what,
And then
that's what.
the second one, the town,
I don't know.
town
If you
father,
offer me
so
a
that-
raise, maybe I'll.
Oh, by
All right,
the
I'll
way,
tell you what.
that is
I'll
our
give you a raise.
responsibility of the town.
All right.
To take care
All right,
of the bill.
so
What is something happen, many people will not get
Which one do you do?
So I'll tell you right now.
then the tax is gonna go up.
Jim?
I called every commercial property owner. And we have all the data.
Occasionally have a long meeting.
And
Whatever.
they like to have it done.
And
No, you probably not.
95%. I rated it.
As long as we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
All right.
Financial.
All right.
With the,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Enough said. Pontificating.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Pontification.
That's exactly the word.
All right, we can get, Jonathan, come on. We're gonna get started again.
Can we just say yes to everything and go?
If you'd like, we could certainly do that, sort of.
But there's a long
Okay.
Mark, we're gonna miss you, you know, if you don't stay.
No, you won't miss me.
We can't talk about him because he can just record the video, see the video, and then we can just.
All right, let me, I'm going to be somewhat arbitrary and just give you some information involving a grant. Only, I just want the committee to be informed. There is no, as it were, work for us to do quite yet. This is item C on the agenda. I think all of you have had a chance to take a look at that, the documentation for that. That particular grant was awarded as a result of work from both the planning board, including obviously Maren, and our committee as well. And the method for administering it and taking care of it more than likely will fall mainly at this point to, I assume, the planning board. They're going to have to make a decision on that.
So we got the grant?
Yes.
Oh, good.
115,000.
Yes. Maren, do you want to make a comment
Good
about
job,
the?
Maren.
$115,000. Generally, a planning study for the area around the commuter rail station.
Right.
What does the town want to see? We will need a 10% local match, so we may be drawing from some of the existing master plan funds or going back to town meeting in the fall for the rest of that.
Okay.
Is there a particular focus of the grant? Is it on transportation or on other kinds of development, or some mixture of both?
On land use, on the way we couched it, well, it's a mass housing grant, so they were most interested in housing and
I see,
affordable
okay.
housing, but we couched it as the combination of commercial and residential development.
That's the one we did around December. That's the grant we did, okay.
Yep, that was that application.
Okay, and the other item, I've already made an announcement about the purchase of the Baker Homestead on Robinson Road. Actually fulfills one of the 7 tasks that we set, but just to show you that none of the things we do are done until they're done. There's a whole other process that has to be undertaken. The town is going to have to decide how the mandate for a historic site is going to be cared for, brought up to code, and all the rest. But at least we've made a start on that one, as we have on a few others.
Exciting.
That's a good one. I think I want to put off new initiative discussions until we meet again. We're going to have hopefully some new members some fresh new ideas and take another look. But I'd like to get at least tonight some sense from this group whether or not we should be moving on at this point in time, that is the next couple of months, into taking on 1 or 2 additional tasks in addition to the 7 that we've already, as it were, undertaken. Just want to get a sense of where we are.
I think we should have a discussion about it.
Discussion, okay?
When we have the discussion and we think about what the most likely choices might be, we might decide that it's 1 or 4
exactly.
or none, as the case
Yeah,
may be.
this is the second or third time I've tried to bring it up in front of us, but we're going to have to eventually deal with it. So let's make an assurance that's going to be top of the agenda, one of the top agenda items for our next meeting.
But I think you make a good point. If we're going to transition membership, that should be,
That's exactly.
that should follow that.
Agreed. Okay. I hope I'm not being premature here, but we're going to get I think Gary is officially leaving us. Is that correct? This is your last meeting?
I don't believe this is my last meeting. I thought in the letter I got from the town clerk, sounded like it was June.
Okay,
June
then-
30th would be the...
Okay, then I'm very sorry about item G, okay? Because you're not departing. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we'll fix it.
More
You
time
have
to
stay
soften
longer,
them up and
okay?
work on it.
party?
What? This friends with an old movie, okay. In preparation for changes, because there's a very good chance that, not a good chance, probably Mark is going to become chair, my guess is, of the planning board. They're going to have his seniority clearly warrants it. I mean, clearly, okay. And Anna will be joining the planning board as well, has already joined the planning board. I'm hoping you'll stay on.
It would be fun if I can.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. You stay, I go.
Okay, okay. If that's the case, then what I have to say next is item H, and that is, I'd like to ask, even if you're departing, I'd like you to give some thought for who you'd like to see join us. We have 2 open spots. I've already started the process of recruiting. I think you know what's needed for qualifications, interest, enthusiasm, and time. So whatever you can do to
Mary, could
generate
you just remind
interest.
us, who's the appointing body for this?
The Board of Selectmen appoints.
Yeah, I'm presuming it's 2 at-large positions,
Yes.
and so it would be planning board and board of
If Anna Anna's had an at-large position. if
She
takes
now
the-
takes, she
she'll
will now
take the
take planning board.
position.
There'll be a replacement for, not a replacement, but as far as I know, the Board of Selectmen will continue to have someone representing themselves here as well. So
Is it going to be Paul, or is he moving off for now?
that's the decision they have to make.
Paul said he didn't want to continue, and I take it now he's chair.
He's chair, so I can understand why.
So
he's not.
probably he...
So we need 2 folks to recruit.
2
So-
at-large and a new selectman member.
But that's
Well,
up to
that's
them.
it's sort of our
We're
right.
assuming Gary's not re-upping, that's why it's 1.
I'm not re-upping. Anna's taking the
And
planning
Anna's
board. so
taking
that's the
Mark, so
second.
that becomes the 2nd at-large, okay.
That's what I was trying to get at.
That is
that
the
we're- We have 2, which is not easy to do in this environment. So I just wanted to make, please, even though if you're not coming back for whatever reason, please do what you can, because we definitely...
It's a tough call, Mike. Like, I would never do that to my friends, and the people who don't like me would never join a board I'm on. So it's a tough thing to do, to fulfill. I'm just saying.
I try to give you very difficult assignments because you whine and complain, and then you come through. So I'm glad you're here. All right. Is there any further comment from the public? And if you folks, any of you here, know of someone, even if you have to look in the mirror, be interested.
Yeah, exactly.
Please, because
This is a great meeting, I really enjoyed.
this.
You know who might be interested? Watch this one. Now that he's, Richard Crowley might be interested in taking, being on it, now that he's not on the planning board. I know he still wants to stay active and things like that.
That's true.
You know, he might
Want
want
to
to,
submit?
you know.
Tell them to get in the running. Nothing wrong with
Because the
that.
application, the selectmen did advertise, said, understanding they thought they were being an opening, so the application period is open now, just you go online and hit the.
He wanted to be here tonight, but he had a class.
Yeah, which is always going to be tough for him. The other thing he has to think about is being able to attend, because that's...
Mondays were always his bad day,
bad day
right?
for him.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, one thing I'd like to get through is the minutes, so that we don't back up. Is that fair, Maren?
Thank you.
Okay. So we have two sets of minutes that I'd like to have you folks take a look at, and I'm waiting for a motion. The first one is for March 22 for 2018, and the second is for April 11th, 2018. Are there any corrections, additions, and required deletions?
There was one name correction that I was gonna have to do on one of those, and I don't remember which it is, but,
I remember seeing something like that, like.
yeah. But with your leeway to
Okay.
make a correction.
Any obvious corrections?
Right. Spelling error.
Okay. So having heard no except suspect corrections, do I hear a motion to accept March 22, 2018 and April 11th, 2018
I'll make a
minutes?
motion to accept both minutes as presented.
Motion, if no
Second.
further discussion, seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let's have it. Is there any other business? Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn?
What? Wait.
I just wanted to ask, what does everybody think about Fort Point and crew?
I think they did a very good job. I think,
Yeah.
they're very knowledgeable. They listened.
I'll let you know when the rubber hits the road.
Thank you.
Okay, question.
You missed your chance.
Yeah, I know. Do we have any examples of, like, reports that they've done for other communities that they've given us?
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah.
I'm just curious if they have the detailed economic study with revenue projections.
Well, and that's UMass Donahue.
That's UMass Donahue, that's the, yes.
So they'll provide that.
What examples?
So
What do you mean?
So at town meeting, you know that a lot of people are gonna talk about traffic. That's has some potential impact on economic development. The traffic is, you know. So part of the study, I thought, might be addressing that. And
And I think the answer that Julie said was that you could look at macro impacts on traffic numbers, but there wouldn't be a traffic study. That's not included in this contract. But as far as economic development is, UMass Donahue will be providing a lot of the details for that, for the different scenarios, existing conditions, and then the different possible build-outs.
Remember, we are on two state roads.
right.
So,
Yes, of course, of course.
And we don't have jurisdiction over those roads. So we can't all of a sudden just put up a wall, we can't put traffic restraints, we can't,
Well, we certainly could do, you know, crossing, walk, light, more light.
No, we can't do those.
No,
We cannot do
no.
those. It's a state road.
So the state would have to, we'd
State
have to
would
ask
have
the
to.
state to do
And,
it.
and they're not gonna do it because you asked them nicely. They're gonna do it, we struggle with this because we're trying to get work done in front of the high school.
Right.
And they have a formula. And if you don't fit in the formula, you don't get it. So when people talk about traffic, there's no question. I mean, people right now would tell you that the traffic is miserable and we shouldn't do a damn thing to add to it. The problem is that the traffic is what the traffic is because we are a pass-through town. When I think about traffic in terms of economic development at the Common, I'm more interested in how traffic is going to come onto and get off the road, which we can have some impact on because pulling into private property and coming out, and the kinds of things that they talked about during the master plan process, shared parking, so not everybody has a parking lot and requires, people pulling out of 6 different driveways all at the same time, which would be chaos. Those are the things they can definitely contribute to. But the point of the matter is that I don't personally think traffic is going to change all that much by developing the Common because the traffic is already coming. What's going to happen is they're going to get off and on rather than just whipping right through because they have something they want to do.
Stop.
Now, and then when it comes into, egress and getting back onto the road, that's a traffic issue that can be dealt with.
But one thing would affect a development is that there are times a day that people just won't go to that area if they wanted to, because well, I don't want to be there between 2 and 5.
Right, and they
I don't want to
and
go
they-
there because
right,
it's bad.
and they talked about that
affects economic development for
talking
that
to
kind
the
of
business
businesses.
property owners, they will tell you, oh, well, my experience is that this kind of business won't work because there's no traffic between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. and I can't have that much dead space, otherwise I won't survive. So maybe it's not even that good an idea for them to relocate onto, Great Road in Littleton where the Common is. We'll find out, But there might be businesses that go, oh, that would be perfect if we had pockets of intense activity, weekends, nights, and then downtime. That's fine. There are some businesses, the 9 round, they're open in the morning, they take a 3-hour break, they open again at the end of the day. Because that's when people work out, right? So there's ways of getting around that, and I think that will be a lot of the discussion that comes out of this process.
That's why we need to get underway.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Motion, we've already adjourned?
No, we didn't.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much.